What's keeping you busy?
Fundraising, a lot of
Fundraising.
fundraising at the moment.
Oh wow, that's something we've heard a lot from a lot of entrepreneurs. It's like when the fundraising comes around, you basically got to allocate all your attention to that externally, and then kind of diverts away from the internal processes and operations. Are you find the same thing?
Yeah, I mean it's a full-time job in and of itself, so then you're basically kind of stuck with two full-time jobs that you somehow need to manage.
And Carl, what round are you raising? Is it seed, Series A, a bridging round between the two?
I'm seed at the moment.
Seed, okay, nice. Well, mate, it's great to have you on the podcast. This is usually how we do things. Just get right into the conversation. Just not no formalities, nothing like that.
Yeah, well,
So
thanks for having me.
what? Tell us a little bit about your business. So what are you building?
Sure. Yeah, so Revolancer is a freelancing platform. Essentially, I started freelancing 10 years ago, found a lot of issues with the industry, and I'm trying to solve some of those with Revolancer now. And essentially, what Revolancer is, it's a freelancing platform where freelancers can exchange services and skills and get inspired by one another.
Yeah, can
Okay.
you elaborate on that then? Because obviously we have so many freelance platforms out there right now. You have a huge glut of people wanting to, quit their 9 to 5, do a bit of work on the side, follow their passions and so forth. And I feel like freelancing, offering your services up is quite a good stepping stone to where you maybe want to be in the future. So can you explain kind of what you're doing to capture that market of all these people suddenly becoming freelancers?
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, we have a service exchange system where you can, let's say, build a website for someone, and in exchange they can do your accounts for you. A platform like that doesn't exist at the moment, especially not one where you can barter with other freelancers. So it's a great way to kind of build your portfolio at the beginning and then exchange that for help with building your brand. And then as you scale, you can increase your capacity and variety of services that you offer to clients by outsourcing parts of that to other freelancers on the platform.
That's really interesting, actually. So, you know, is a big part of your customer base kind of cash strapped? People that are more interested in kind of, say if you're building a business or you need some design work done, is like a kind of quid pro quo deal where I will do some work for you and I'll get some value in return.
Exactly. Yeah. So you pay with your time and your expertise essentially, rather than with money. I mean, freelancers, when they were surveyed late last year, recommended starting freelancing with 10,700 USD on average, but that same group of freelancers on average started with less than half of that amount. So it's very clear that people feel, that they need more money, or ultimately that they need to get more for less.
And how are you making money on top of that?
There's a £5 per month membership fee per user, and then we also do larger B2B, kind of partnerships with co-working spaces who will then buy, say 100, 200, 300 seats for their entire community.
So how does that work on the B2B side then?
Well, I mean, a co-working space can basically buy seats for freelancers so that they can include it as a perk of membership. And then they pay us, the £5 per month per seat instead of the individuals using it directly.
So then the freelancers then effectively work for that business that's bought them the seats?
No, so members of that co-working space, which are very frequently freelancers.
Right, okay.
That's interesting. And then so tell us about your fundraiser, and you're kind of in the midst of it right now. I want to know personally, why do you need the money from your perspective? Is that to grow a sales team? Is that to get more devs on board? Is that simply for scaling operations? What's the money going to go towards?
I mean, very top line answer is because we don't want to be profitable on a small scale. We want to be profitable on a very large scale, or ultimately just grow to a very large scale and then possibly IPO, possibly exit through a competitive acquisition. So our investors, past and present, are not interested in us becoming profitable. They are interested in us reinvesting everything that we make into scaling as fast as possible so that they can make a sizable return down the road.
And what does scaling look like to you? Is that you kind of thinking geographical expansion? Are we thinking, working your way up the chain, working with like bigger and bigger corporate clients? Or what's your first kind of beachhead you're going to take?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, we're already an international platform. And I mean, ultimately, there are 1.56 billion freelancers in the world today, a number that's growing. That's currently a third of the global workforce. And we currently have just under 20,000 on the platform. So, we want to move a bit closer to that, to that limit.
Nice, man. That's really interesting. And then kind of talk about what was the origin of your idea? Why did you start to decide to settle on Revolancer and kind of the years leading up to it, maybe?
Yeah, sure. So, like I mentioned, about 10 years ago, I went into freelancing myself to try and make money online as a teenager. I quickly realized that the platforms I was using at the time just weren't really serving freelancers properly. So they were taking enormous commission fees, and they still do today. They stop you from communicating with your clients outside of the platform, which, again, they still do today as well. And it even back when I was 15, I started a freelancing platform. So with about £200, grew it without being able to spend anything on marketing because I blew my entire budget on just getting the website online. And I ended up selling that platform after about 5 months or so. So I have quite a bit of exposure in this space. I felt for a while that, there really needs to be some innovation, some improvements. And then especially when the pandemic came and we were in lockdown and video calling became such an essential part of remote work. I just knew that we needed to do a lot better and that there was a lot of room for improvement in this very fast growing space. And that's how I came up with the idea.
Interesting. So it's something you've had a lot of experience with since you were a lot younger.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So what sort of freelancing were you doing back then yourself?
Yeah, so I started with graphic design and then quite quickly went into web design and development as well.
So do you have any specific verticals that you focus on with Revolancer for freelancers?
Yeah, so it's kind of B2B services that can be done remotely. So the main four are web development, graphic design, media, and marketing. But it spans beyond that as well.
Mm-hmm. And typically, are these kind of like one-off projects, or do you kind of dabble in, contracting and getting people on for projects that may take, 3 to 6 months plus?
It's typically on the shorter side, but we see a big mixture of different things, including much longer term projects.
And why personally was it graphic design for you? Is that kind of like a childhood passion? Is that art and design? Is that something you did as a teenager, or did you kind of covered it from quite a business approach of being like, this is a high skill, a high demand skill, and I should train myself up on it and kind of put it out into the world?
So basically, I think the way it started is I was trying to make a YouTube channel when I was 12 or so. I then got obsessed with trying to have a nice channel banner. So I pirated a copy of Photoshop and kind of taught myself how to use that and gradually got better and better with it. And then when I went into freelancing, that's a skill that I'd already learned. So I didn't really go into I sort of went into learning that skill with the goal of, growing something, in this case, a YouTube channel, but not so much because I thought that I would charge money for that service. It's just because I couldn't afford to hire a graphic designer at that point to make some channel art for me.
It's often how it happens, right? It's just kind of convenience almost. It's like, you had the baseline and you just needed to kind of stack skills until you got to where you needed to be. But I want to ask you as well, and we can touch on this in a bit later as well, you have a background in AI, as I understand. Do you think that a lot of these kind of freelance roles will be AI'd away, so to speak? So, I mean, you already have so many tools that create images for you, create designs for you based on, input descriptions. I've seen things like, building whole PowerPoint decks from scratch in a matter of minutes, just from a few simple prompts. Do you think there will be a market for things along the lines of kind of web development and graphic design in particular in the years to come, given the kind of pace of development of AI?
I think in the short term, possibly sort of much lower end services. So maybe where if you go onto Fiverr and you pay someone $5 to build you a logo and they use a template, in that case, probably yes. But I think more largely it's going to impact the freelancers in a positive way, because I think freelancers will use these tools to be able to do more in less time. And the reason why I don't think that in the short term, at least, add that as a caveat, but in the short term, with what we have right now, with ChatGPT, obviously, and other kind of image generation kind of stuff, the reason why I don't think that's going to cause much of an issue in the short term is just the quality control aspect. So ChatGPT can generate great content, but ultimately it can't think. It's not smart. It's just a fancy version of predictive text. It's basically, like on your phone, where it tries to guess which word you're going to put next. It's that, but it's trained on 5 million web pages, so it has a lot more training data. So that's why when it writes, it can accurately guess what word will come next that will make sense. But ultimately, it makes mistakes. So, for example, ChatGPT attempted I think it was a dermatology exam. So for doctors who want to specialize. And part of that exam is kind of giving a list of symptoms and trying to diagnose. And then there were 3 kind of questions. The first one, it diagnosed correctly. The second one, it diagnosed incorrectly. The third one, it made up a new disease with symptoms to diagnose the patient. So, it just goes to demonstrate, if you use ChatGPT to generate content about an area that you don't know a lot about, it will answer with such confidence that you will probably, you'll assume, oh, this is all correct. But in reality, it's not fact checking. It's not like thinking the same way a human would. It's just based on all the web pages it's read, trying to guess which word is going to come next. And that can result in it making things up or completely just false information. So I think, and this is already where I've seen it work really well with freelancers. Let's say you're a freelancer who's a copywriter, you can use it to generate a draft, but then you go through and make the final edits. So now you can save a lot of time doing the work, and possibly also then charge the client less, and a few other things. So I think it will have an impact, but more in that way in the short term than, kind of replacing freelancers, especially more skilled freelancers that charge higher rates. But in the long term, it's very difficult to say. But I think ultimately the one thing that is kind of essential, and I don't see how people are going to solve this, is for it to be able to fact check itself. But that's such a difficult question, because it even starts before you even think about the technology, who decides what is fact and what is not fact? It's just such a complicated issue. So exactly. I think yes,
if you're basing it as well off all of the web pages on the internet, as you said, there's going to be so much wrong information in there. So how do we, at the very first level, be able to tell what's right and what's wrong? And then there's the assumption that a human's going to have to step in and basically designate, all right, these are facts and this is fiction. And then you have embedded in there the bias of the human, right? So I really appreciate your point. I think you're absolutely right that these things will only really be a superpower in the kind of foreseeable future, purely because you're always going to have that kind of human intervention. If you're going to have human intervention at the start, you're going to need it at the end as well. And there's going to have to be human discretion applied to the output as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the best way. So to use it as a tool to enhance your work rather than to replace you. I think that's what it's going to be in the short term.
And tell us about your project. I was just on your website earlier, and you said you were using AI to track and predict sentiment in reader responses to news articles. So this was was it a final project you did at university, something along those lines? Explain to us, yes, why you decided to do that, and what did it look like? What did the product look like?
Yeah, sure. So yes, it was my university final year major project. It started with trying to detect fake news using AI, but at that time, and this was in late 2020, the kind of first research papers around this topic were at that point only a couple of months old. So it was such a new field, and I realized quite quickly there probably isn't so much that I can do in this area specifically, also because of these issues like how can you realistically fact check? There are so many problems there. So then I thought what might be quite interesting is trying to build a system that can predict how people will respond, like audiences will respond to news articles. So Basically, what I did is I built a scraper that would collect all of the new articles published by the 9 major UK news publications, as well as all the reader responses to those articles on Twitter. So I got an academic API access to Twitter, which meant I could scrape something like 1 million tweets a month or something like that, which is a lot more than you can normally do on the free plan. And then basically I collected all of that data. I then did sentiment analysis on the reader responses. So basically trying to figure out is a percentage breakdown of positive, negative, and neutral sentiment. So, if I'm saying, oh, I'm going to kill you, that's probably high negative sentiment. Or if I'm saying oh, I really love what you're doing, then probably high positive sentiment.
Are these the comments left on any piece of content you were finding? Is that how you were? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Exactly. So I matched up the articles on.
Sorry, just before you continue, I think it's actually an interesting point as well, because I was reading a similar study on this recently, which is you always get the extremes, or there's some kind of study into showing that the 95th percentile of people will only ever comment. So you don't see the kind of responses of how the mass of people feel. That's why on social media you get, in particular, such a divide between black and white, left wing, right and wrong. All of these kind of very pressing social and political topics. A lot of people seem to be very divided on, and that's because the loudest voices often are at the extreme ends of the scale. And I think that's, from a personal point of view, whenever I go on, Twitter, I only ever really see those strong opinions. And that does not reflect the opinion of maybe even kind of 90% of the people that are consuming whatever news article or piece of content it may be. So yeah, but as you continue to explain, I was just interested to hear if you had kind of considered that as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's the same reason why if you look at any businesses' online reviews, it'll be either 5-star or 1-star, But yeah, I mean, and that's why when I collected these reader responses, I took the average of the sentiment score. So, if it sort of angered more people or made more people happy, or if most people are responding to it in quite a neutral way, it averaged that out. So, the overall response is quite good. And then at that point, I had a neural network that trained on the articles with the kind of average reader response sentiment. And then for new articles, I could then predict how the audiences would respond. So it was very interesting, actually, because you could demonstrate the audience of The Guardian and the audience of The Express would probably react very differently about the topic of Brexit, for example. And I could model that with the actual with the classifier built, and with it continually scraping more and more data. It became smarter and, kind of quote unquote smarter and smarter, more accurate over time.
Did you find that these kind of results were fairly dynamic as well? Did you find that people's sentiments changed over time? Because obviously, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I would think that a Guardian reader in 2016 would not probably have the same views as someone in 2021 or 22, or even that same person, their ideals, their opinion of the world, given their own personal experiences, times current events, times, various things happening that have happened in the last few years, their opinions will slowly morph over time. Is that something you noticed or did any kind of analysis on?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost certainly the case. The articles and responses that I scraped, I started scraping, I think, in January of that year, and then I shut it down in probably about May or so. And within that time frame, it collected more than 500,000 articles between these 9 major UK news publications. So it was all within a very kind of tight time frame of only 4 or 5 months. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, if I were to continue with this project, then that's certainly something I would need to keep in mind.
Oh, is this something that's fairly ongoing that you're looking to pick up again, or?
I might pick it up again at some point, but for the time being, I'm very busy with my current main project.
You could turn this into some kind of product for Twitter, right? If you have all these voices on Twitter that basically, as far as I'm concerned, exist to stir shit, right? And to get people's heart rates kind of going and get people offended or excited about something, some kind of, tool that would allow them to craft the most impactful storylines, I think maybe is not a net benefit to humanity, but it could be quite a useful commercial proposition.
I did actually very briefly after I graduated. I worked with a couple of people, and we adapted what I had built into basically for brands to predict how their social media posts would do. So like,
Yeah.
would it get a lot of responses? Would it do well? Like, would the responses be, what kind of sentiment it would be? And it worked pretty well for that as well. But ultimately, that's a project that I didn't continue working on for a couple of different reasons, mainly because I wanted to focus full time on Revolancer. But it's absolutely something which I am planning to pick up again at some point in the future.
So, Carl, it sounds like you got quite a suite of technology skills. So, in terms of getting the Revolancer platform up, is it something that you built yourself, the product, or did you hire a team to build it, or how'd you go about creating it?
Yeah, so I mean the very very first kind of MVP I built myself, but then quite quickly I brought Sky on board, who's my co-founder, and who has been building the platform ever since. And Sky's a much better developer than I am, much better software engineer than I am.
And was it a smooth transition between what you had built and then him taking over, or was he kind of like, "Hey, we need to reassess and rebuild here"? How'd that go?
It was kind of built on top of what I built, but like I think the stuff that I built probably makes up like well below 1% of the current what the current code base. So yeah, I mean it's mainly what's been happening since.
And those coding skills, did you acquire them in university, or was something that you're interested in growing up? Computer science.
I mean, I was very interested growing up, but then also I did my degree in AI and robotics, so there was a lot of that involved a lot of coding as well.
Nice, nice. And how did you find the programs at university for improving as a software developer? Because I know a few people that have mixed opinions about that. I sort of stand on the side of it's useful, but I probably learned about 80 to 90% of my own software development skills by doing projects.
Yeah, I mean, I have a very mixed opinion on this particular topic. I think with most university courses, I think that it's in a lot of cases like better not to go to university. But with this one and a few others, of course, like maybe medicine or law, obviously, but with computer science, I'm kind of on the fence because ultimately I think you can teach yourself a lot more, a lot faster just by yourself. But the problem is that people who are fully self-taught coders can oftentimes pick up very bad habits and do things in a very kind of inefficient way. And you learn a lot of that more theoretical side that kind of need as a base at university. But that doesn't mean you can't learn it online. It just means like, if you kind of Google, how do I learn coding
it's
or whatever?
It's not given to you in a structured kind of way, right? That's the key. Because I think in university, they might be teaching you about queues and all this kind of stuff, message queues, and you're kind of thinking, why the hell am I learning this? It seems so abstract. Like I'm never going to be coding in assembly. But then it's when you actually become a intermediate to advanced level developer and you're reading documentation and it says, oh yeah, this when you call this method, this is what it does. You're like, oh yeah, I remember Mr. and Mrs. such and such in university talking about that. That makes sense to me now. I guess I didn't waste 3 years of my life.
I think sometimes it's with education as well. It's a bit of accountability, right? I mean, we can all sit here and say like, I'll spend the whole weekend, learning the basics of this new skill, and then I'm going to keep doing it for the next months and years. But I think education does give you that platform of, firstly, is this really what I want to spend my time doing? Because, we've all been there. I certainly have, where you just kind of try a project, drop it, try something new, drop it, and you try and kind of iterate and find what you like and what you want to spend your time doing. I think university goes a hell of a long way into kind of cementing, all right, I do or don't like this field. I want to steer as clear away from it as possible, or I want to kind of lean into it more. But there's also that accountability of simply, having the structure of exams and all of the like, and having different modules and as Sarai said, getting it in quite a structured way, that keeps you accountable and avoids you kind of, as you said, Carl, like avoiding those blind spots you may have otherwise and the bad habits that you may pick up if you just were kind of left to your own devices.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say at the end of the day, it's always the individual who decides whether they're going to learn it or not, right? The medium can change. It can be university or it can be self-taught, but it's you as an individual that decides, yes, I'm going to dedicate the time and energy to learning this. There's just slightly more efficient ways of learning something. And I think you make a good point about I wouldn't say just computer science. I'd say a lot of technical subjects. I think it's important to have
I think
sort of
STEM.
a
I
form of
think like
education. Yeah, STEM.
any STEM subject. I'm sure, Carl, when you said some of them aren't worth it, you're talking more about like on the humanities end of the spectrum. Um, I think in that case, I was thinking about this the other day. It's funny because I was thinking, why would you go to university if you're going to end up in just, like an office job or whatever it may be, or like an apprenticeship, um, that has absolutely no relation to kind of what you're going to be doing on a day-to-day basis, right? That has no relation to your degree. Um, and I think it is simply because, if you went to university in any capacity, any kind of employer can see, all right, you kind of know how to show up on time, put work in when required. You're going to have like this base level of reliability. So it's almost like I need to go to just get this stamp, so I can get employed, rather than having actual real world benefit in the same way kind of learning a more STEM subject would.
Yeah, I mean it's a very expensive stamp in that case. But yeah, I mean, I'm I'm quite skeptical of the formal education system as a whole, across most subjects. But I think that's also partially because of how I learn. I can teach myself stuff much more effectively than someone else teaching me, and I don't know. That's probably not how most people are, but I think there are a fair number of people who are like that, at least, who, where school and university probably just isn't really made for them very much. So yeah,
Do you think
don't
AI
know.
will change that? Do you think AI will change that? Because obviously, like one of the huge benefits that a lot of people are talking about is in the next 5 to 10 years, it has the potential to kind of uproot the education system, uproot how people learn, and instead of having classes of 20 people, 20 kids who all sit in the same room, learn the same thing at the same pace, and no child left behind, and all of this stuff, and kind of limits the top and the brightest students. Instead, you have some kind of AI that will tailor, based on development, level of learning, prior learnings, language, medium in which they learn best, whether that be kind of text, photos, video, whatever it may be. Do you see that as something that has a potential to disrupt the education system?
I think there's definitely potential there, but I think the issue is that the formal education system hasn't changed for such a long time. I mean, they hardly even acknowledge calculators exist, let alone the internet, let alone now things like ChatGPT. So I hope that at some point, that there will be major changes like you suggested, but I think that it will take a long time. I think it'll be a lot. It'll be a lot of time from when the technology is there until when it actually gets adopted, I think, by the education system.
Yeah, legislation and regulations adapt a lot, adapt a lot slower than the changing environment that we live in. But Carl, if you were to take a step back then, and if you were talking to somebody, let's say 13, 14 years of age, who's still yet to take steps into the real world and grown adult and choose a career path, what would you say to them in this changing environment? The fact that you work on a platform for freelancers, that education is not all what it seems to be in your perspective. So what would your advice be to someone in that situation?
I mean, absolutely, to just understand that at that point in your life, you'd have very few obligations, really. It might not feel like that, but you have a roof over your head, you have food provided for you, okay, maybe you need to go to school, but outside of that, you don't really have many obligations. So then now, that it's absolutely the time to just really explore the stuff you're interested in and focus on your passion. You can do so much stuff nowadays, and even 10 years ago when I was that kind of age, I taught myself graphic design, I taught myself basic web development, I went onto freelancing platforms, I made some money, I built my own websites, sold my own websites. So these are all things you can do. So whatever it is that you want to go into, it's absolutely worth exploring it at any point in life. But if you can start then, you can get a big head start, first of all, but also there's not really any risk. You're not like, if it doesn't work out, it's not like you're going to be homeless the next month or whatever. Like, you're not looking after other people financially.
Yeah,
it's just, you can just experiment freely, basically.
Take a risk while you can.
That's a very efficient and productive way of approaching the world, especially age 13, 14. You know, your future children are going to be some super geniuses, Carl. So
I
no,
mean, I have
I'm
no
surprised.
idea.
I'm surprised there was no allowance for drinking and smoking as a 13-year-old. I'm just kidding. But no, that's very true. Absolutely. That's why I said to my younger brother a couple of years ago when he was 16, 17, like now's the opportunity to invest in yourself when you have no obligations and really get a head start in life and really have, you know, a kind of edge to whenever you're older because those things they matter so much. Like they seem so trivial when you initially do them because when you start you're not necessarily exactly advanced or particularly good at anything when you first start, but even if you cultivate 12 to 18, 24 months of hard work and effort, you know, the dividends for that can pay off, you know, 10, 20 fold, 5, 10, 20 years down the line.
Absolutely. I mean, like, I guess I'm a somewhat good case study of this because, like, you know, I very much practiced what I preached here. Like, within 3 months of graduating, like with my bachelor's degree, I closed a venture-backed funding round for my startup, a VC-backed pre-seed round. Um, I heard that only about like 0.02% of startups managed to close VC funding in their first round. So, you know, on the outside, that sounds like, you know, I don't know, somehow I really knew what I was doing, or I got very lucky, or just, you know, right place at the right time. I don't know. But ultimately, you know, for 8 years before that point, I had, you know, built so many different websites, tried building so many different businesses, failed over and over again with so many things. But just never gave up, kept trying, and then ultimately put me in a position where, you know, I could go basically full time into running my own startup directly out of uni and get paid for it. Because for 8 years, you know, pretty much the whole time, I didn't really make any money from what I did, and when I did, it was certainly not enough to, like, for an adult to live from. So yeah, I mean, it's really good to get started at that kind of age because you don't need to make money. You can just learn. You can just fail and learn a lot from those failures, and then ultimately, when the time comes, you can, you know, pull something off and have a head start.
Exactly. I think one of the adages that goes with that is either you win or you learn. So even if you're failing, you're learning in the process. So you're not really failing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Fail forward.
But that's fantastic. I appreciate that transparency as well, talking about, you know, just how long it took you to kind of start earning money and get off the ground. And there's so many people, 99% of people would have given up in those 8 years, right? They would have given up after a month, frankly, the vast majority of them. What was it kind of seems to me that you really did know deep down that this is a route you want to take. Because yes, you can. Very much understand the concept of, you know, get beat down or get knocked down 7 times, get up 8, and just keep going and going and going. But there's something, especially in the entrepreneurial world, which is like you need to know when to quit. So when you're kind of following these pursuits, how did you know that your vision at the end of it was something that's worth spending years and years potentially making no money off, because you know that the prize at the end of the day is great enough?
It's something like I've tried thinking about this. It's difficult to understand exactly why, I think. I mean, when I was 13, I remember I just got the idea in my head that I needed to work for myself and that there wasn't any other way. I don't know, like, why exactly that popped into my head, but it stuck around. And that tends to be kind of how I've always been with everything. I'll, like, get an idea into my head and then be just absolutely relentless to, like, making it come true. I don't know why I'm like that, but I think, you know, in this case, it really, really benefited me. I think it's just because I knew deep down for a very long time that, like, I needed to work for myself, and if I tried working for someone else, it probably wouldn't end up working very well. And then I think, you know, like a few years after I got started, I did some work experience while I was in sixth form, and it got, like, reinforced definitely that I didn't, you know, that working for someone else just wasn't really for me.
I think, yeah, that's a common trait between all of us here, and particularly everyone who will listen to this, that it's that control and that freedom that you crave. Ultimately, I think that's the most important thing we should try and achieve in life. The freedom to do and make the decisions that we want to make, as opposed to doing things purely for money or for recognition and stuff like that. Some people may disagree, but that's my personal opinion. But then if you just go a little less high level than that, kind of why was it in particular? So you talked about graphic design and the website development you did, and you've now gone on to make your freelancing platform. It's all kind of operating in the same kind of niche. How did you know that niche and that industry was where you wanted to spend and devote your time? Or maybe you did jump around a lot of industries, and if you have done, then maybe you can fill in the blanks there and about why you tried different things.
I mean, I did absolutely jump around trying a lot of different things, but it was mainly within this kind of freelancing space, like kind of creative services. I guess because it's what I started with, so it's what I understand the best, and also, like really understood the problems of best. And then I was just sticking to my strengths, because like being like a couple of years ago, just having graduated from university, like I'm completely fresh into the professional world. So if I'm going to pull off a business, really make something work, it needs to be something that I understand a lot and already have a lot of experience in. And this is an area that, I understood very well for the past 10 years. So
what did you do outside of this, man? Do you have any hobbies or passions, or is it still all within the same realm of like creative and creative services? Do you spend your time writing? Do you spend your time like doing art or something like that? I can see you as maybe someone who kind of dabbles in that in their spare time. Shed some light onto that, so we can kind of we can understand what kind of guy you are outside of your business.
Sure. So I actually don't do any kind of art. I don't do any kind of writing whatsoever. I mean, like for a very long time, I would ignore school and focus on, and then university and just focus on trying to make money online and build different businesses. So the point where when I graduated and went into this full time, I would work, 10 hours a day or something and feel really guilty because I felt like I was procrastinating, even though I wasn't, but like for such a long time, the procrastinating and the hobby part was like working really hard on the business. So that's something I actually kind of struggled with for a long time, because I just felt so guilty, because it felt like I was just procrastinating the whole time. Very, very weird. But yeah, I mean, regardless, I mean, outside of work, it's something that I do struggle with a little bit, because I am very driven to work on what I do. I actually burnt myself out quite badly within a few months of starting. So I learned a lot from that experience. So I kind of, I have to force myself to, quit while I'm ahead sometimes, just, in terms of finishing the day or the week or whatnot. But yeah, I mean, outside of that, I really enjoy going for walks. I recently got into chess, which is something, game I could play for a while. Never thought I was very good at it. But then now that I did some more of the theory around it, I seem to be somewhat okay and I enjoy it. So continuing with that.
Where do you play? Where do you play chess? Online?
Yeah, I went onto chess.com and kind of started on there a little bit.
Nice. I'm a big chess fan. James knows this, so he was
okay.
I saw him look at me as you mentioned the chess. But what time games do you play?
Oh, I mean, like nothing too serious yet. I mean, like really just getting started with the just the kind of initial lessons and stuff on chess.com, and like
nice.
Because like for a long time, I knew what the different pieces do, what they're called, that kind of thing, but not like the importance of controlling the center of the board, like protecting your pieces,
sort of
how to develop them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just that sort of stuff. So yeah, getting more and more into that. I have a very good friend from university who was the president of the chess society, and he's obviously very into chess. But every time I play against him, I just got absolutely demolished.
We need to have a live session between you and Suraj. Just a live competition, live stream, yeah. Set up a Twitch together.
I think I would definitely lose in that case, but maybe I can get my friend to play against you. That might be more of a competition.
No, I don't know, man. He talks a
Um,
big game, but he's not all about that.
okay. But yeah, no, I mean, a few different things, but ultimately I spend a lot of time thinking, about work, because for a long time that was my hobby, and now that's what I do kind of full time.
I get it as well. It's like I think it's a great sign because it shows that you are really invested in what you're doing, and it's not a chore or a means to make money for you. It's something that you're not only investing your time but your emotional energy into as well. We've spoken to founders recently who had, for one reason or another, had to kind of shut down their business, right? It might have been failed, or like, even like as small as like taking a down round or something. Like, how do you explain to all of your tens or hundreds of employees how you have less money to work with, or that the vision that they bought into is now kind of in the bin? And the reason why is because a lot of them take them personally, because it is just such an emotional investment, and you become almost married to it, to your startup and your idea, and the thing that you built becomes like your baby, like a family member or something. So when you do lose it, it does feel like kind of losing a friend or a family member along those lines. It's kind of the anecdotally what I've heard. So I think it is a great sign, but as you said, there needs to be some balance in the world. Have you thought about traveling, kind of? I've personally been burned out so many times before, whether that be kind of working my own thing or like working for someone else. Have you thought about traveling to kind of mix up your environment anymore? Do you have any kind of nice insights and tactics into how you kind of break the burnout, or is it simply just like shut your laptop for a weekend and completely put your mind out of it and try and get back to it on Monday morning?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, I was quite fortunate to like travel quite a lot with my family growing up. So I've been to quite a few places, and it's always a great escape. And I think, like, especially last year, in the summer, I went to South Korea, and I remember thinking, because it was for like 3 weeks, and I remember thinking like, oh, I don't really need this time off work, kind of like almost feeling guilty about it, just thinking, oh, I don't really like need this. But then by the end of the holiday, when I came back, I was like, wow, I really needed that. So I mean, like, ultimately, I don't like, if you're already burnt out, I don't think there's much you can do other than just like try and step away and try to do other things. But I think the real important thing is like not getting to that point. And I think the best way not to get to that point, or at least what's worked for me, is understanding that like growing or just becoming successful, growing a successful business, this kind of stuff, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And what that means is, like, if you run a marathon, throughout pretty much the whole marathon, you are running slower than you are able to, probably a fair amount slower than you are able to. But that's so that you can actually make it the whole way through. If you like tried sprinting at the beginning for, I don't know, the first few kilometers, you'd just tire yourself out ridiculously and probably couldn't complete the rest of the race. So that's how I think about it. So like, and the other thing is just like quit while you're ahead. Let's say I don't know, you spend like the first 7 hours of the day just like win off to win, like meetings go great, you just feel great, and you're like, oh, awesome, I'm just going to work like another 4 hours or whatever. Just don't quit while you're ahead. Like, if like celebrate the wins for the day, do something nice in the evening, that kind of thing. So I've been like constantly just reminding myself of those things, and it's meant that I haven't really burnt out since this happened like a year and a half ago. But yeah, before that, I would work like 10 plus hours, 6 days a week, and I burnt myself out.
Yeah, man, I really fantastic advice, actually. I think it's so relevant because of all of this hustle culture and all of the kind of related people inspiring and encouraging you to work as much as possible. And, if you don't work hard enough, that guy next to you is going to overtake you and this and that. And a lot of kind of like sports analogies, and when it comes to like training and stuff like that, this predatory sense of, I have to give it my all every time I step in there. There's a time and a place for that. I think the wiser and more experienced entrepreneur or business leader, or even employee, whoever you may be, knows when to kind of turn on the gas, in the same way that maybe like a long distance runner would. You compared it to a marathon. They know that they're likely not going to run it all at one pace. Like, when do I run slower? When do I pick it up? When do I need to conserve my energy? And kind of think about it tactically like that. And I think, to add to your point, the disadvantage of to kind of, agree with you is that when you push hard, you often push hard in the wrong direction. I think a lot of the time, a lot of us kind of work for work's sake, or we work to look busy or to feel like we're doing something. And, maybe you spend 1 month with your head down. You didn't look up to see, where you are, what's changed, what's new, like who could have helped you with this, where could you've gone for advice. I think we've all been there where we've got our heads down, or whether it be like a coding project or some piece of anywhere from like, it could be like a bit of writing or even the most mundane thing, and kind of shut ourselves off from the outside world and not think about the bigger picture, and not think about, am I actually going in the right direction, or am I just working for work's sake? So to always have perspective on where you are, and where you're going as well is a highly underappreciated skill. So it's fantastic advice, man. I was going to ask you questions along those lines as well, but you pretty much answered it for me. But we do have to wrap up now, Karl, but I really appreciate your time, man. Sorry I had to drop off. You had some connectivity, electricity issues. If you want to end on anything like that you want to plug for yourself, or talk about anything that's coming up that's exciting for the listeners, yeah, just shout now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're a freelancer and you're interested in Revolancer, then you can find it on Google. Also, I'm happy to answer any questions or help out where I can if you add me on LinkedIn. So hope that's useful. And thanks very much for having me. Really enjoyed the chat. And I think that, I think he left after we started talking about chess, and he might have gotten a bit intimidated by by my kind of beginner skills. But
man, he talks the big game, but I've witnessed him lose a number of times, and I want to see him lose again, so we need to have you on.
We'll try it next time.
Yeah. Oh man, it's been a fantastic conversation. Thanks so much for your time, Karl. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.